that area still with the conversation that we've had in the past and the conversation that Fern had today, it brought it up again. So my suggestion for the cure would be that whenever it's felt that perhaps an executive session would be appropriate, that rather than make that decision ourselves, that we do contact Laura or somebody from the state about whether our interpretation of debates and personnel discussions is a correct one.
I agree with you, Eve. I think that would, anytime there's any question at all, if we check with her before we do it, then hopefully we wouldn't make the same error again.
That does seem most reasonable. Anyone with something else to add?
Ben's raising his
hand. This might already be covered, but I was just thinking, often I've seen agendas posted by certain public bodies, and I think this is maybe a good way to go, so that you say executive session is expected for such and such. Any decision or agenda items about, you could be discussing something and then go to executive session about personal, or personnel. But it can all be part of a warning, and any meeting that executive session is going to be held in, of course, should be warned. It can take away some of, it can reassure the public, I think, sometimes if you show that as like, this is we're discussing these topics, but there's going to be an executive session. And I don't know if that would have helped or if it can help. That's all I have to say.
Eve, did you raise your hand? Thought you were. That seems reasonable. Ben, let me get clarification on this, because I want to make sure that I'm understanding what you're saying on this. No question in my mind that we can put it on the agenda, that there's the possibility of executive session. How specific? I mean, you've had experience seeing this sort of thing in writing. How specific do we need to be on our agenda as to what is going to be discussed within, as a possibility, as a possible executive session discussion?
I think probably other people maybe could speak better to the guidelines for warning, but I think suppose you're discussing, I don't know, candidates for hiring or what, or something like that. We can make it real low key, like snow removal or something like that. And you could put snow removal on there, and then there could be executive session expected while you talk about specifics. And you come back out of it to make some decision. But you could, if you give an indication on the agenda, if there's executive session and there's nothing at all says about it, that could be, I'm not suggesting that the board did this, but that could be good to let them know it's executive session, but it might still seem kind of like opaque. Maybe I just muddied things further, I'm not sure.
There's a comment in the chat from Nicole about I'm on an iPad, so it's kind of hard. If you're expecting an executive session, you can just add it to the agenda. If an action is anticipated, that needs to be clear.
Thank you, Nicole. Appreciate the clarification. So we've got these two suggestions about contacting Laura each time there is any question about a topic that might go to executive session being needed, to get clarification as to whether in fact we can legally do that on a particular item, as well as the suggestion that there be a warning on an agenda item as to a possible executive session. And if an action is anticipated, that we need to be clear as to what we would be discussing. Anyone with other thoughts, other suggestions, thoughts on what we've said so far? All right. Oh, yes, Kathy, I sent that around to the trustees. It would have been last Monday, and I'm hopeful that everyone took the time to read it. I know I did. Eve?
No, I'm muting. I'm sorry. It's me on the iPad. I guess I would say that at other times we have kind of as well. Kathy's saying it explains executive session, but what we've had come up, Kathy, too, is that there's been these kind of other areas. There are some things that I think are very obvious to be an executive session, but some others that we feel that just straight out asking, should we be doing this in executive session, would be the way to go. Brenda's saying something. Yes, Brenda, yes. The question was, if action needs to be taken, don't you need to come out of executive session to do that? Yes. I think that some people came a little later, that was the first piece that Carrie mentioned, was that the vote should have not been in executive session.
All right, anything else that we want to add to the cure? All right. Vern, if you'll double check me on this, because I know you're taking notes as well. That I see two things that we're using as our cure. One is that we contact Laura Keenan each time there's even a question of use of executive session to see if it's appropriate or not. And the other is that if there's the possibility of an executive session, that it be warned and put on the agenda. And if we think that there might be an anticipated action, that we list the topic that is being considered. And
Yes, absolutely.
so that's what you've taken from this as well?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Does the board have any problems with accepting these two items and as our cure for our violation and having it listed in our minutes? If you are in favor of accepting these two items as our cure, please raise your hand. Okay. I know, strictly speaking, that I should have asked for a motion for that, but I will do that now because I screwed up. Thank you. Second? Eve, thank you. All those in favor? Passes unanimously. All right. The second item on our new business agenda was a range of questions for the hiring committee to consider. Again, I asked for feedback from the trustees to think on this and hopefully have some things to share this evening. The things that I came up with were two. One was discussion of expansion of hours for the director and or responsibilities for the director that we are searching to hire. Anyone else?
Are these questions for the committee to consider, or is it kind of the charge of the committee? Are we going as far as to say what we're expecting to come out of the committee?
I'm not sure we made that decision either.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if that was the point that we were discussing it. I guess mine would be the same, that looking at the position to see if it should be 20 hours or more. And then the second piece, looking at the job description and some other documents that we have about the responsibilities of a library director, and rethinking that 20 hours piece.
Considering the that we've fielded from the community, I think I would feel very comfortable having this community-based committee being charged with making these decisions. I think that would help the community feel more included and heard. And I think that's the whole point of all of this that we're doing.
The state library has specific guidelines as what should be required for a library director, so that can figure into the discussions that the committee will be having.
Are you able to share that information with this Fern, or is it too involved for this particular venue?
I was muted. It's rather lengthy, but it is in the trustees notebook that we all have.
Yeah,
I can get it and
yeah,
read.
we all had that. We looked at it earlier.
Right.
It was like pages.
Then we can share that with whomever is on the committee, and they can,
Right.
rather than us going through it at length at this point.
Right. I think it'd be more appropriate to have with the actual committee, particularly for discussion and refinement.
Another thing that was brought up, there was some question about whether the search should continue, or if we should start a new search, or if we should just go with the candidate that the community felt. I think that was something that was not decided, but would definitely need to be decided as well.
So Billy, are you saying that a decision of the committee would be whether or not to reopen the search?
Yes, or whether we accept the candidate that the community seemed to want. Because I also think, I'm not sure, Carrie mentioned that letting the community and the committee make the decision. But my question is, if they do make the decision, then wouldn't we be required to vote and accept that decision as a board?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other comments?
I think that any further questions would have to be whether or not to reopen the search would then lead in different directions for follow-up questions. So if we're trying to narrowly define it at this point, I think that maybe defining kind of a shorter term version of it is to get to that point. And then at that point, the committee would go off in the other direction. Does that make sense?
I'm not sure I got that. Say that again, please.
There are other questions that we would have them to consider, whether the search was reopened, or it would, if the search was not reopened, that would lend to some other questions. So for example, you know, how to advertise the position or something is not applicable if another decision is made. So I think that kind of puts a stop to the questions to come up with at this point.
Gotcha.
If we're saying that decision is going to the committee, they have to make that decision first.
Right. Right. Yes. Unmute. Ben, if you wish to share something, you need to unmute, please.
Thanks. If I understand properly, like the way, not trying to rehash things, but the way past you know, meetings and minutes were, you know, well, minutes were not the problem. The meetings were warned, and I think if agendas weren't posted, say like, you know, it's all going to be executive session, but we're talking about hiring a director, that may have been included. But if there were flaws in the warning, not just of a decision being done in executive session, but of other things throughout the last months of the hiring, I think there really isn't a choice but to reopen the search. And I guess maybe I'm not acquainted with the extent or limits of open meeting deficits, but I think there were a lot of meetings that were not warned with an agenda, and I think your only choice at that point is really to reopen it, because those meetings would not have been legal. So your work done during that period wasn't seen as, you know, meeting that open meeting law standard. And I'm not trying to make a lot of work, but I think everybody, including trustees, wants a really open and you know, transparent way to move forward. And I think I heard a lot of comments about how this can be done even better, and I just don't. I wasn't seeing a way that you could go forward without reopening a search, even if it's going to involve the same people, you know, that end up responding. That's just what I'm hearing and the way I understand it.
I think I'm going to follow up with Ben's with agreeing maybe for a slightly different reason, but if there's going to be any change to the position, it has to be reopened, because there could be people out there who would want to apply for the changed position who didn't apply initially. Or if there was a problem with how we advertise, it should be reopened. So I think we should go with that in mind.
That seems reasonable. Okay. So we're looking at reopening the search, but before we can really do that, we have to determine the parameters of what we're looking for in terms of hours and job description. Is that what I'm is everyone else understanding that as well, please?
Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
lot of questions in the chat, and I'm having trouble looking at it because I'm on an iPad, which is why everyone keeps thinking I'm raising my hand. There's a question about, is the position changing or your criteria changing? And I think the answer to that is that that's what the committee will be figuring out. On the simplest level, the narrow way that we were looking at it of this 20-hour position, that's the piece that's being changed, and if that's being changed, that means the criteria is changing. But that would be what's going to the committee. So I suppose it's possible neither will change, but that's what the committee is re-examining. The thing about needs, interest, hopes, and the members of the community have regarding the library and what qualities a new director might need to meet these. So more of the visioning question came up.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, the committee the first thing that the committee needs to do is determine what exactly it is that the community wants in a new director and how many hours that position would be based on the criteria that the state has set forward and also what the community would like. And at that point, the search would be reopened if that's what I'm hearing. I don't know if that's the correct interpretation or not.
That's what I was hearing as well, Billy. Does anyone have a problem with our interpretation of where we're going with committee expectations and moving this search forward? Take that as we're okay.
I think Ben's gonna say
Oh, I'm
something.
sorry, missed it.
No, Kathy has her hand up. That's all I was saying.
Kathy, please then.
It sounds like you're heading in this direction, but I'm just trying to take in all of the past meetings that I've observed. And I just feel like the question of whether to continue the search or start fresh, if there had been no questions about the process or no critique from the community, or the trustees hadn't been approached by the Herald for Vermont open meetings law, it might be worth considering picking up where you left off. But just because of the history and the order of events and the things that happened, I think to kind of regain public support for the process, starting fresh would be important. And when I hear you say the community, I'm wondering if you mean the 20-some people extra who attended the past few meetings, or if you mean the Tunbridge community or the library patron community, because I still am talking to people who have no idea this is happening, maybe until the article was in the Herald. So I think when you have a longtime director of 37 years retiring, the library has really a unique opportunity to involve the community in that process of hiring the next director, doing some of that visioning, collecting community input, and maybe you end up with the same candidates and the same results, and it's clear which candidate that points to. But I think the process is what's so important to do that. And I'm not, I don't know if all of the trustees feel that way, but I feel like there have been some comments made at some of these meetings that have pointed in that direction. I'm just not hearing that tonight. So that community involvement, community support, this is a big leadership change. And there's a lot of neat opportunities that come with that.
Quite true, Kathy. And as always, I thank you for your input and the experience that gets you there. On the one hand, I would like to see as much input as possible. On the other hand, my concern is that if we have too large a committee or forum, that it gets unwieldy. We don't want this to go on indefinitely. Kathy, I'll take your please.
Maybe I'm having trouble articulating this. I don't mean that the committee should be large. Actually, small committees can get a lot done, but there might be something like a 5-question Google survey that goes out to the community, and maybe 200 people respond to that. And that committee kind of takes that feedback in when they're working on that search. And maybe the committee is 7 or 8 people. So I'm not suggesting that you have a large forum working on the whole search process, but just so that there's a chance for community and engagement and involvement. There's a great newsletter from the library, there's social media, different ways to grab at that feedback, just so that your community feels tied in, especially during a pandemic when patrons aren't walking into the library every day. And can stop at the counter and say, here's what's important to me about this library. So it's a good opportunity just to ask for that feedback, but you don't need a big committee.
Thank you for the clarification.
Right.
Teresa?
You need to unmute, Teresa.
Teresa, you're muted.
There we go. Okay. Yes, Kathy, I agree. And I do think starting the committee is really your first step. And I think a clean start, given that what you've done in the past, we're not sure how much of it would be accepted still. And then once you start that committee with community members, there are people who can reach those community members on the committee and share their opinions or their concerns more so than they might to a trustee who they know is in the final vote process. So it kind of opens up that community forum with, you know, a way for someone to have some direct contact with the process through, like we're giving them a voice, you know. So if they say, oh, you're a community member, you're going to be on the committee, these are some things I'd like you to bring to the attention of the committee, and eventually, you know, falls to the trustees. But I think it just opens that channel of communication. So I think really starting fresh and letting the committee kind of format, you know, how this thing is going to take shape and be done, you know, in the proper steps is a good start.
Perhaps one way would be then to start another user ID that's the committee or an account. The trustees have an account, a Google account. Perhaps there needs to be one for the committee that is a place where the community can input to the committee then.
Right. Eve?
I'd like to suggest, if we're putting like the charge of the committee or questions for the committee, that this be one thing that they should do is to determine how they will get community input. So whether that is what Billy was just discussing, or whether it was what Kathy was discussing about the survey, or that be one of the first things that the committee should try to figure out is how to elicit community input and what questions to ask.
I think that's
And that should be the committee and not us.
That works. Vern?
they will be community members, so they will be able to help us format ideas to bring to the community in whatever form they decide is the best, whether it be through the emails that the library sends out or whatever other means that they decide.
That works for me. Seems most reasonable. Thank all the folks for the input. Anyone else with a comment, suggestion, whatever on the hiring committee? Questions for it, where it's going?
No, but the one question that I have is, I think we said that we wanted the committee to start meeting in January. And the question in my mind is, who is going to make the decision on who is going to be on the committee, how many people, and will there need to be a meeting before that to determine that, or what?
We have
At our regular board meeting on the 2nd.
On the 2nd of January?
Second Monday.
A second
Monday.
Yes.
So the committee would not be able to start meeting on the 4th then, as we had suggested.
Well, we had given them to January to actually submit their letters of intent. Is
okay.
that correct? Yes.
I thought it was December 28th.
December 28th was when I had put down for letters of interest.
Okay.
And I wanted to get the committee going as soon as possible, and I probably put the cart in front of the horse, putting the committee starting on the 4th when the board doesn't meet until the following Monday.
And the reason I asked, oops, am I still muted?
You're not muted.
Okay. The reason I ask is because, again, with the open meetings, that's not something that we can discuss without being in a public meeting. I'm assuming. Because we have, I think you said, Carrie, we've gotten several letters of interest and intent.
I think we have 5 or 6. I haven't checked today. It may be up a little more than that, but
There's
it's
a new one today that I sent you.
right. I just haven't had a chance to get on the.
Right. I had to scan it and send it as an attachment to everybody because it came in as a physical letter to the library.
Well, they
Or
still,
through the
those still
library,
work.
I think. Yeah, no, but that's the latest one.
So I think that that's the other thing that we need to decide tonight is when, I'm assuming that the board needs to make that decision, but it needs to be made in public. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
As far as I know.
So do we want to wait till our board meeting the second Monday, or have a short meeting the first Monday to determine who the committee should be?
I think we should have the other meeting.
That's fine. We can do it as part of the agenda. That makes life a little simpler. I don't have a calendar in front of me. That makes, instead of the 4th, our meeting is the 11th.
Correct.
And the committee couldn't meet until after the 11th.
No, I was saying that we should have another meeting to determine it. But
Oh,
that's
just-
the item.
I misunderstood.
Just to determine the committee? So that could be the meeting on the 4th.
Yeah.
And have the only purpose of that meeting be to discuss how many and who should be on the committee.
Yeah.
Okay.
There was a question whether everybody on the committee needs to be from Tunbridge. Is it only open to Tunbridge residents?
I'm not sure that we set that parameter. The library as a facility is open to non-Tunbridge residents.
I'm thinking that we should probably ask Laura about that. I don't know.
I'm okay with that.
Teresa's raising her hand.
I'm sorry, Teresa, please.
No, that's fine. Yes. I have taken the liberty of looking over the Vermont Library bylaws. They're online. You can download them. I had them in my documents from when I was trustee. And correct me if I'm wrong, Jean or Ben, but we are a municipal library because we are funded by the town,
Yes.
correct? And so my thinking would be that it would be a Tunbridge resident responsibility because it truly is, you know, the board is representing the taxpayers. And I do wonder if you're really opening up a whole nother situation there with inviting in, you know, non-residents. Now, we do have a lot of people who use the library seasonally, but they are typically residents. So
I think
I would just caution you on being the way the library's funded. If you're giving people, although they're not the ones with the essential power to make the decision, it's still the trustees. So I don't know. That's a tough one. I would think that went through.
Dan, please.
I think, yeah, I think checking with Laura would be great. And while it's not, it doesn't feel as exclusive as town government in some other ways, like the library is open to all, but really people can use facilities whether they're residents or not. There are a lot of patrons who are not residents. That's the case. But I do think, I don't want to be exclusive in any way, shape, or form, but there is a certain kind of circular and connected way when you guys are the trustees who we as the community of Tunbridge has elected, and you're appointing people within that group. I think, surely anybody can come for the meetings, but maybe Laura could shed light on that, whether what's legitimate and what's suggested, but there is, just wanted to say the two things is, often like if other committees are formed by public bodies, they usually have to pick from Tunbridge residents, like the planning commission is made up of Tunbridge residents, other things like that. So boards usually do committees, but there are a lot of patrons who are not Tunbridge residents. And technically those are the summer people are not residents either. They're only here part of the time.
What about sort of a compromise that the committee is made up of residents, but that the survey or other input gathering vehicles can be open to anyone who uses the library? Would that seem reasonable?
What I'm thinking is that, and we're talking about residents and non-residents, but as taxpayers, even though they're not residents, they fund the library. So I don't know if that could be a distinction, whether you're a taxpayer. I know Marcia just said we receive donations from people who are not residents, and they are certainly welcome to give their input. And we would hope that they would, but I kind of agree with Ben that you would probably either need to be a resident or a taxpayer perhaps to actually be on the committee.
Yeah, let's just check with Laura on that. I also agree with Ben though. It is a municipal library.
All right, have we finished the discussion for the second item on the agenda? Anyone with an additional comment, question, feedback? All right. Then at this point, I'm going to poll the trustees and ask who wishes to participate on this subcommittee. Mark, I'll start with you.
I am not going to volunteer for this. I don't think that I'm going to be able to give it the time it deserves, just with my work schedule and kids. I just don't think it would be responsible. I'm still at work right now.
Understood. Billy?
Oops. Am I muted?
No,
Okay.
loud and clear.
I do not wish to serve on this committee at this time either.
Fern, you're muted.
Yes, I will serve.
Thank you. Eve?
I will not, but I wanted to just kind of add to that. So I am up for, my term ends at town meeting. I am not going to run again, so I would be up at that point. I realize that this is a community committee, but I feel that being on it in 2 roles is rather awkward. Also, the time constraint, it's been a tough fall with being full-time in person at a school in COVID. And I just, again, to do it through another 3 months or whatever, I can't do it. But that said, I'm willing to attend any meeting that anybody wants me there for, while I'm still treasurer, having to do with salaries and any of those pieces of information, especially since that's one of the topics of discussion. But I do not want to be on the committee.
Well, Fern, I thank you for volunteering to be on this committee because I'm going to have to say no, I'm not available for this committee at this time. So we have 1 trustee and the rest will be committee members. All right, is there anything else that needs to be brought to the table at this point?
Nicole had a comment in the chat.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking for it. Nicole, there's only 1 trustee on the committee, and since it would and I don't think that having Fern on the committee is a problem. She's secretary for the trustees and she would be keeping notes.
I think it's important for Fern to be there to take the notes, since it is part of the trustee's responsibility. And since she is the secretary, then she would be the one to take the notes. So I think it's a good thing to have her on the committee.
Nicole, I don't know if we've addressed your issues to your satisfaction, but I think we've addressed them. All right. If there's nothing else, I have a personal statement that I need to make at this point. I have submitted my resignation to the board, to the select board, and it is due to non-COVID health issues, and my resignation is effective at the close of this meeting. I want to thank the trustees for all their hard work, and I wish everyone well. If there's nothing further, I'm open to a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second? There is a second. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And the motion passes. At 7:54, we conclude our meeting. Thank you all very much. Good night.